And we should be live. I'll just check Facebook real quick, but I guess we are live. So welcome everybody to this live discussion on the Ecom Services Summit. I'm super pumped to be joined by 5 people who are way smarter than me when it comes to e-commerce. So I cannot wait to get this discussion started on how to 10x your ecom business. And we'll start by going around the room and just giving a brief introduction of who we have on this panel. And we'll go ladies first. So Kim, could you please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, ladies first, except I was last getting here. Yes, thank you for having me on. So I have an e-commerce, a physical product, a content creators planner. I am new to e-commerce. It's only been a little bit over a year, but I'm sort of all things content strategy, all that good stuff. So that's sort of my e-commerce intro, I guess I would say.
My name is John Schultz. I'm CTO of Ellipsis Technologies. We have a few different app names out there. They all kind of connect to our main product, Human Presence, which is started out as a capture replacement tool, and also ended up turning into lots more things about basically stopping bots from doing what they do. And so, as you can imagine, that relates to e-commerce pretty directly. There's a lot of everything from email spam, fake account creation, to bot-based checkouts and abandoned checkout protection, things like that. So I've become a lot more aware of e-commerce problems and feel the pains of our customers and merchants. So I've definitely become way more e-com focused the last 3 years. But actually, before that, I had done several different stints in marketing, and we had a few e-commerce platforms that we supported as well. So been around the game for a while.
Nice. Jaime.
Yeah, Jaime Sutton here. I am the GM of OmniSend. We are an e-commerce focused marketing automation platform. We've got integrations into Magento, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, and Shopify Plus.
Nice. And Tom.
So my name's Tom Fanelli. I'm the CEO of Convesio. We're a managed hosting provider, do a lot of WooCommerce hosting, things like that. And I just have to pause for one moment because Jaime left out a huge chunk of his background. He was like one of the head guys over at Shopify for like 6 or 7 years. And basically, I think you kind of were the internal founder of the Shopify Pro or Plus product, right, Jaime?
Shopify Plus, yeah. It started off with myself and salesperson Matt Pasiga, and obviously we started as an experiment, but that experiment ended up changing the industry.
Yeah, so a huge success there. Robert, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. I'm an open source evangelist, former president of Joomla, and executive consultant for SaaS hosting and agency firms, primarily in the WordPress space.
So that is a powerhouse of people that we got here. So if you have any questions, no matter whether you are on the website, in the Facebook groups, on the Facebook pages, we are streaming to Convesio, or on the YouTube channel, just put in your questions and we'll make sure that we get them answered. And I do have one question. We do have a very brief outline that we prepared for this session to make it as valuable as we can. And with all those very smart people in here, I think you are in for a treat if you're watching this live. So if you are live, by the way, let us know with the hashtag live in the comments so that we can pay attention to you, welcome you. And if you're watching the replay, comment replay so that we know that you've seen it and we can follow up with you. And the first thing I want to talk about is marketing strategies that will help you scale revenue. So that's obviously the holy grail that everybody is striving for in e-commerce. And I'm not sure who the best person is because of all the people that are with me today. So I just leave it over to you guys to have just a casual conversation, I guess, on what you think are the best marketing strategies to scale your revenue.
I think Jaime should take a run
working.
at this.
Yeah. I was going to say, paid traffic. I mean, we're a content planner. We create a ton of content, but paid traffic has been the gold key for us from day one. And we're only on 2 platforms right now, but we got lucky. Literally, I think we probably lost money the first time was Mother's Day, so a year later, and we just did it slow. But I think testing that market, knowing your product, the problem it solves, and then understanding obviously the paid traffic channel. But I would, for e-commerce sellers, you can't not do paid traffic. I would assume. So that has been the gold ticket for us. And now it's really looking at how we can optimize any of those landing pages or new audiences. And as lookalike audiences are growing, that's helping a ton. But I'm a huge fan of paid traffic, and we'll never do anything without it again.
How did you go about that? And by the way, welcome Marcus, welcome Tex for watching us live. Thanks so much for joining us. And Kim, how did you get started with paid traffic? Because you were like the organic content marketing queen. So what's that transition into paid traffic like? Well,
this was a lot of work, right? Doing this planner, we had a failed Kickstarter that we then pivoted because we weren't going to hit the funding. Excuse me. And so then we did it with pre-sales. We pre-funded the whole thing through our own website, built up through the WordPress chick and all that kind of stuff. And so, we had a market. I had the Content Creators Facebook group, and it was just a lot of work. And I have friends in the e-commerce space, and I just was like, we are not going to do this slowly. I'm all for content and the long game and the SEO piece of it. So we literally just said, look, we know it was also knowing the product so well, knowing who we were serving, although that had surprised us. We started with $10 a day, and our primary audience was profitable from day one, and probably May through November was, we just kept going with it. It was really, and then we hired agencies because it was like, neither of us are, Jody's much better than I am in terms of scaling the ads and what percentage to put to audiences and stuff. But yeah, it was phenomenal.
So Kim, can I jump in with a question on that? How did you go about, and I think like the way I think about, scaling revenue, right, is you've kind of got, you've got people who start out like you did with an audience, right? And that's a totally different game than if you're starting from the ground floor with no audience. And I think the other thing, and my tip would be that for those people who have established businesses, find additional products and services to sell into your existing customer base, because that is a great way to expand revenue, right? You don't need to necessarily scale your inbound demand to scale your revenue. If you've got ancillary products and services, you can tell people. And so I say all that to pivot that I think the harder challenge is kind of sort of what you did, where you didn't have any customers to sell another product to. You were getting some of your existing customers or your existing audience to buy your product. How did you, because I would say we've not been super successful scaling with paid ads. How did you identify the audiences and the niches, especially spending $10 a day? That's like so little. It feels like it's like you have to almost get like a strike out of the gate, right? A bowling strike, not a baseball strike. You got to get you got to hit it dead on right out of the gate with $10. Otherwise, it's a waste.
It is. Well, and I'll tell you, we're about 1,200 a day now. So that's a big, in a year, that's where we've come. But it's because like this, we created a product. I mean, and I'm not an e-commerce, like pick a random thing. And there are a lot of people that can go find a product, they can find a market. And that wasn't it. Like the planner solved the problem I was having. And so then when I partnered with Jody, so it was not hard. Our target initially was like digital marketers. That's what I've been doing for 12 years. So, and I think being two female founders, we targeted. We didn't split the audience, but we targeted, and I don't necessarily want to give away our target audience. Yeah, there's Jody, but we really knew who would speak to this. And we did a lot of research on other planners. There's nothing like this on the market with the strategy. So I know I would say it's a competitive market with digital marketing, but it was almost like this novelty of having this physical planner, that solved this digital problem. And so, because the truth is, even though I had an audience, like we would have exhausted that pretty quickly. And so we knew from day one that we had to put the money behind it. And we didn't take money. God, we started this in the fall of 2018. We didn't take money until the fall of 2019. So we just kept putting it back into ads. We knew it was not either of our primary business. So, in terms of that, I don't know. I think we've both been around a long enough time that we understand and have both worked with Facebook ads. So I don't want to say we got lucky, but I think that we knew the problem we were solving and who it solved it for. And then we created one good ad that still to this day was one of our highest return on ad spend.
Yeah, it's interesting. I got some really killer advice from Vito from WP Feedback, and I was kind of asking him similar questions. And I love this. Like, it was this sage advice that I knew. When you hear things and people are like, they tell it to you, and you're like, duh, that's so like common sense. Why didn't I think about it? And I was telling him, like, yeah, we're trying this and we're trying that, and da 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 da. And like, he's like, it's not the channel that's the problem. It's not LinkedIn or Facebook or, Twitter. It's the offer and the messaging that you've got to get right. And I think that is really like a key. A lot of times, like, especially as marketers, we can go and try and think the next new app is going to solve our scale. Like, ooh, if I just get this app, I'm going to be able to scale. Or if I implement this like hack or something, I'm going to be able to scale. And the reality is it comes down to knowing your audience and being able to really have a compelling offer for them that hits that pain point.
Can I just say really quick, and I will shut up. So we're talking. Jody and I spent probably, I think we had a 6-hour Zoom call on Saturday where we went through Donald Miller's story brand. And we're like, no, we kept coming back to it. It was like really making sure that the foundation, the problem, the solution, and who we were talking to was super clear. And from there, it's like we take copy from our own website for everything. We take copy from the platform. We just keep reusing because the message is on point. And so it's taking the time to do that, where a lot of people are like, product, great, hey, and they just find an ad swipe and they use that. So it is that clarity and taking the time to do that. I think that's key.
Okay, and I'm going to say one last thing and then shut up. So the rest of these, I'm going to get a link to StoryBrand and we'll put it in the chat. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a really good framework to developing your messaging.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with StoryBrand, and we'll just put it up as a banner right now. So give me a sec.
You're already on it.
I'm already on it. So there we go. That's storybrand.com. As we said, highly recommend this. And I would love, Jamie, I would love to hear your thoughts on what it takes to scale revenue.
Yeah. So I think we got half of the card there for sure. Obviously, acquisition is really important, and most of what we deal with is on the other side of that, which is the retention. The cost of acquiring a new merchant or new consumer is always way more expensive than monetizing your existing base, or expanding your existing base by creating the right segments after you've acquired that customer, and then syncing those segments back to create a lookalike audience on either Facebook/Instagram or on Google Shopping. So the way I look at it, there's multiple ways to carve this up. And if you're running straight e-commerce, I think one of the most important things you can do is start looking at the data. Look at, what products the consumers are looking at when they come to your site. What are they converting on? What are they not converting on? How do you actually start to roll that into segments to message them across different channels, and really start to vary those messages that are really fine-tuned into the interest that they're hitting your site on. So if I've got a segment of merchants who are always converting on a specific collection or a specific PDP or a specific product type, then really getting narrow with that scope and really getting specific and parting that demographic out so that you can message very precisely with the types of products and services that they're looking for. So I think the acquisition is huge, but the other part is really narrowing down on your messaging and creating those segments once you've acquired that customer.
That's really, I like that because it's data driven and it takes the guesswork out of scaling, which I think is a big issue that sometimes you just go with your gut feeling instead of trusting the data. But how would you go if you were starting from scratch? If you don't have the data, is it just pouring money into Facebook traffic or any other traffic source really and gathering the data so that you can refine?
So I would still go data driven here. I mean, there's lots of publicly available data. You can look at others who are selling products similar to yours, build audiences that look like their audiences, start off with some Facebook ads, some Instagram ads to simply get visibility. in front of the demographic that you believe and have some data backed information on to start to at least drive the traffic to the site. Now, once it's on the site, your site has to be fast. You've got to have a way to, get them to opt into messaging, have an offer for them, something to get them engaged in your brand right when they hit the site. Usually you've got 30 seconds to grab them, whether you're sending them to a PDP that doesn't have the right CTA, or whether you're sending them to a homepage that doesn't have the right content for the audience that you've gone after. So I think you can still do that starting from nothing, but it's really about looking at your competitors, looking at the demographic that they're marketing into, and building that lookalike audience. And I think you can do very well, just like Kim did, with starting with $10 a day, $40 a day, experimenting at those lower volumes so that you can get the messaging right, get the traffic honed in that is your key demographic, get the signups happening so that you can actually start to have that first party data, which is really, that's the gold mine. It's the first party data that's happening on your e-commerce site that you own and that you can start to really dive into and get that granularity with.
I love it. And Robert, what do you think about the data-driven approach?
It's absolutely critical, and it's no fun when everyone else takes all your answers. Thanks, Kim, Tom, and Jamie. But, I firmly believe in having a consistent methodology. That doesn't mean you do the same thing every time, but you know how you want to go through the process. So knowing that you're going to generate this type of content, that you're going to do this kind of medium, and then, of course, tracking it. So having some kind of process that's consistent so you can, again, evaluate apples to apples, not, apples to oranges. And then patience, like Kim mentioned, she started at $10 a day, and prior to that, organically. So that takes time, and we love talking about, scaling 10x instantly, but it's a lot of hard work and patience. So consistency, patience, and then, as Jamie really kind of nails it out, is the, being able to measure it. Having, first, setting your own expectations for what you want to happen with your marketing, measuring against that. Are you meeting your expectations? Are you exceeding them? And then diving into the data to figure out what has worked and what hasn't worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to piggyback on what Robert and Jamie were saying. I really feel like design is an important component too. I wouldn't put it above the other two that we've just talked about, but I think it is a part of it, because especially for beginners, when you're first getting started with e-commerce, there's a lot to it, and it can be overwhelming. So sometimes you grab a template or a theme, and depending on the platform that you're on, and you're just trying to get going, and there's so much you're thinking about, all the nuts and bolts. And honestly, I think if you can kind of pare down and look at the design, so that the few customers that you might be getting there, if you want them to understand what they're seeing, if they want them to understand where they're going, clear calls to action, I'm surprised nobody mentioned it yet, but as far as talking to the customer, if you're not getting a whole lot of them in, you want to grab them in the first 30 seconds, like Jamie said, which I totally agree with. Live chat. I mean, it's something that's not a gimmick. It's not going to instantly get you everything you need, but if you can increase that conversation, especially in the beginning when you're having a hard time getting conversation from customers, you're not even sure you're doing it right. I think that even don't be afraid of it, even with a small staff, even if it's a one-person shop to start with. You can just experiment with it, turn it on a little bit here or there. Having some good customer feedback software is important too. Help desk, whatever you want to call it. But I think getting those conversations started is very powerful, because they'll help you figure out the gaps really quick. You don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you, and you suddenly realize what they're thinking, and it's so far different than what you might have expected. So I think that part of getting 10x is like you guys were saying, is this capturing the traffic that does come, even if it's just a little bit of traffic, and making sure you can capitalize on that. And as Jamie and Robert were saying, be able to repeat on that and get more of that.
That's really exciting. And I do have one more question for you, John, because you are really experienced with mitigating bots and stuff like that. So
sure.
One thing that I see in analytics all the time is traffic that's not relevant. So that's bots coming to the website essentially. And I assume those skew the data quite a bit. When you have like 5,000 visitors and 3,000 of them are bots, like what do we need to be aware of there?
That is a great question. That is actually something that's constantly changing and very difficult. We don't do a lot of that. As far as our product goes, there's a lot of good products that will actually help you filter out the data on the, on the paid traffic side. Based on what Kim said, she's probably had some experience with getting a lot of bogus traffic, and some people will go to great lengths to actually negotiate those rates back to get some of your money back that you spent. There's some good products out there that can help you track that. We haven't jumped into that space at this point. We've focused more on the just the annoyances and the diversion of revenue from absolutely orchestrated bot attacks. So if we talk later about flash sales, like I can really tell you about more of that, and Jamie can tell you more about how that can be a big it's like a blessing and a curse. You get a lot of peak traffic, but then you also get some unexpected results sometimes, and it can really hurt your customer satisfaction and things like that. But to try and answer your question, yeah, it does skew the data, and it does make it sometimes hard to create those segments and those funnels, like Tom was saying. When you're trying to really double down and dive in and understand your customer and who your potential customers are. Depending on the platform, there'd probably be a different answer for each platform on what paid search you're trying to do, whether it be Facebook, whether it be Google, whether it be something else. So I'd hate to get into a really specific solution scenario, but you're absolutely right, Jan. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to make sure that we come back to that when we talk about the flash sales.
Okay.
I cannot wait to hear more about this. But first, I would love to bring it back to Kim a little bit and to hear more about how you scale, because scaling an ad campaign from $10 a day to over $1,000 over a year is definitely something that's difficult and that you need to be very cautious of. And from my experience when talking to the Facebook reps, they always recommend to scale like 20% a day, because otherwise it would reset their algorithms and bring the campaign back into learning mode. So I would love to know how you went about scaling your ad spend.
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback off of one thing John said too about design, because I hope I'm not coming across like we had a great idea for a product. It was $10 a day, and now we're doing Jody's a graphic designer, and she 30 years in business. We had a head start with a lot of this stuff in terms of a landing page, and even though we've worked with it, we have a second agency we're working with for ads now. It's like she's the shorter stick to work with her, and she's really good. She's so much better about the data and stuff, but it's like we've got her design skills, and she's an essentialist too. So she's really helped me slow down, and really focus on optimizing what we have. I just wanted to kind of shout that out to her. But so what we did is we kept going for $10 a day, and then we would try one other audience at $10 a day. And then once we were kind of figuring out audiences, we just played with it ourselves, right? And so the scaling was kind of all over the board until the fall, and we realized we were getting just this phenomenal return on ad spend. We had tried scaling to $100 a day, and it went up one day, and it was like boom, because we went from like 20 to 100. It was just, we were like, woohoo, look at this go. No, it didn't work. So we brought in the agency who did it, and so they scaled for us. And we hadn't, in the meantime, we had one order bump. So I just want to kind of pull in a few of these things. We had one order bump for a class. We had some bundles and stuff, but we weren't doing anything on the back end, and we had follow-up sequences and active campaign, but it wasn't data driven. We were still sort of in the testing mode. And so we had an ad agency, and they scaled us. Like we went from 6,000 in November to 41,000 in December to 67,000 in January. And then they reset something, and I think because the Facebook was changing to the campaign level versus the ad set level, and we went from our highest day to half of that the next day, and it never recovered, which sucked because we had all these months of data with Facebook. So at that point, we said we're very much a partner with the agency because we're digital marketers. We're not like newbies to this space, and so we really needed someone to partner with long term, and so we let that agency go. So truly, it was the agency. Jody's answering the question. See, she's the essentialist. But they did it, slowly over time. But so those jumps that you saw, like we got to take advantage of December traffic and all of that. But they worked with the algorithms, and so that's how it was scaled.
Interesting. And I want to bring one story that I see in the comments to our attention. That's from Sheep Dona. Thanks for sharing that. And she shared a story about how they started with their e-commerce when they were just starting from scratch, essentially. And she says that she had 5 different products, and they created 2 memes with their products on it, then boosted those on Facebook. And I would love to hear your thoughts on leveraging memes to create awareness, essentially, and maybe even make the products go viral.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Tom.
go ahead, Kim.
Did you rephrase
Well, I
the
was just
question
going to
as
say,
well?
Jan's just throwing it out here, and everyone's going to talk at once. The interesting thing is, and she brought up some great stuff on the networking room that we were in yesterday, which is she was looking at her competitors and really sort of figuring out what their playbook was, the best of breed people. And so she did some amazing work where she's like, look, we identified these 2 or 3 people who we determined were really crushing it on Instagram. And she spent all of this time like literally dissecting everything that they were doing to get all of these great ideas around memes and posting schedules and frequency and all of that. And I think, one of her things that she does is she helps people map that out for people. And I think that that's really good. Memes can be incredibly catchy, witty, and quick again, but if you know the customer and you know that pain point, right? So what is the meme saying, and how much does your target audience identify with it?
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up a good point in that she always did the work. That's something that I think many e-com entrepreneurs who are starting out these days, and they see all the people advertising, make money, drop shipping, and build your own e-com and stuff like that. And these, I don't want to say get rich quick, because some people really, really say that it's a lot of work, but it's difficult for new starters to understand that it really is a lot of work that goes into scaling an e-com. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because or before we then transition into customer acquisition. What do you think about the mindset thing of scaling an e-com and being ready, as Kim said, to invest back into the business before you can take money out of the business?
It's not optional, really, unless you're going to pay with time or money, right? So if you don't have the money, you have to kind of go into it, pay with time. It's kind of, I just look at that with digital marketing in general. And, again, like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like Jody was this gift that landed in my life, and it's the patience level and what happens now, because we've only added 1 product as an example, and that was because our customers told us they wanted it, the Trello version. Really being able to look at all these things that are working and saying, wow, we recovered this much through an abandoned cart sequence, we recovered this much through a follow-up sequence. And so then you go, let's write better emails. Let's see if we can shift the message here. And so, like, it gives me goosebumps. It's like it starts feeling like this ninja fun game where all of a sudden you can increase the cart value, you can increase customer retention just by tweaking stuff that you put in place to begin with. So, I mean, to go into it is a long game, I think. I mean, again, unless you've got super deep pockets to go at it. And that's part of the fun. I think we've been very transparent about our journey, and it resonates with people. So I think the mindset piece, you have to go into it. It's a long-term game.
Yeah. And I think, Robert, you also wanted to chime into this.
Kim stole some of my thunder, but it's whether it's e-commerce or any other startup, unless you have some wonderful investment ahead of time, the effort's going to be the same. It's running a business is not easy. If it was, there'd be billions and billions of successful people. That's not the case. It takes a lot of hard work and determination, and then tying all these sort of best practices that we talk about. Being able to measure, being disciplined about executing, and whether that's putting together the right meme and figuring out the right product mix. Just cutting through it and spending that time. There, in a lot of ways, there's no magic formula. You're going to have to work at it and look for opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. And one thing that I would like to ask you, Robert, is how can we improve our cost of customer acquisition, or how do we even go about customer acquisition? Because that is coming back to opportunities. I think, one of the biggest ways where we can scale our businesses.
I am a firm believer, and obviously Kim does a lot of this, even before the SEM, is, good organic content. And once you've, gotten to that first page, make sure it's fast, make sure there's metrics associated with that, is having that clear call to action. With that in mind, that will get you part of the way there. What I believe is very effective is having good word of mouth as well. So, getting out there and participating in things that take time but not money, and get your name out there as, an expert in, email or training or hosting and whatnot. And that will help, catapult you against all the other noise that you're fighting against. I mean, if we look at, let's take Tom's market, especially hosting is a huge space, and being able to, segment yourself against many other hosting competitors, what makes you stand out. And just being able to do that will generate, customer leads and acquisition.
Yeah, and I think that, by the way, I mean, so much good stuff has been talked about here, Jan. Just to rewind for a sec, I totally agree with you that there's so many people out there trying to sell these like e-commerce in a box strategies that they just make it sound like when you're first getting started, if you don't know and you've never done it before, it's almost like you go in with this preconceived idea that it's less work than it actually is. And I would add one thing to say, to go back to, you guys were listing off, Robert, a bunch of really good traits of being like sticking to it and hard work, being fearless. In the startup world, we talk about getting to your first 100 customers, right? Or if it's a really big ticket item, maybe it's 10, right? But you don't know what you don't know until you get some people buying your product. And so I think that for the people that are starting that have really, really like small startups from the ground e-commerce, like you got to go out there and be hustling your wares, like people you meet, go to networking, well, now it's all online, but when I say be fearless, like I wasn't necessarily the person who was the face of a business before, and I have to be with Convesio. And so you've got to do, like, you look at Kim, she's like all over the speaking circuit, right? She's got that following, she's got an audience. I look at like John, with their product, right? They're a tremendous success on the Shopify marketplace. They weren't that way. That wasn't the first thing they tried. They tried a bunch of other stuff to figure out like, how can we sell bot protection, right? And it's like, well, shoot, they got this app on Shopify, and we're like, whoa, people are like buying this thing up like crazy, And so you sort of have to work at it and figure out you might not be successful with $10 a day on Instagram. You might have a product that might not be successful on Instagram, right? Yeah. But you can't just be like, well, it didn't work on, SEM, and so I just gave up, right? You got to hustle and figure out. And I think that sometimes, like in my mind, when I think about like, I've got to scale a demand generation engine here, it's kind of like, no, I just got to go meet a few people this week and see if I can sell them on my product. Yeah. And so I think that, keeping that frame of reference in mind, that you got to hustle. People ask me, how am I doing? How are you doing? Well, I'm hustling every week. I'm literally hustling every week. If you come to Convesio, you're going to talk to me at some point if you're a customer. So
I love it. And on that notion, I want to just bring on the networking area again. You mentioned it already, Tom. We had a really good conversation there yesterday, and people are really making connections in that networking area. This morning, I was with Dennis Yu and a few other people in there. It was 2 a.m. for Dennis Yu. So speak about hustle there. And it's really paying off to be there. And just keep the tab open. If nobody's in there, or if you don't want to join, just keep the tab open and see if somebody interesting comes along. Definitely worth spending some time in throughout this week, because we can't go to physical conferences. That's just how it is.
Yeah. And I think you're spot on, Tom, with your networking piece. Every entrepreneur I've ever worked with, they failed miserably, like multiple times. And that did not deter them, number one. Number two, they got better over time, right? And they learned who to network with, where to get advice, how to become savvy at areas that they, maybe had failed at previously, until they broke through. I've got, people that I've worked with that have, built $70 million GMV companies, but failed for the first 4 years of its existence, right? And it's, success is not accidental, right? It is perseverance in the face of adversity, in the face of challenges, and reinvesting in that dream. And I think you can't underweight how important that is.
Yeah.
That's
I'm really
good.
glad that we brought this up, but I'd like to circle a little bit back to the customer acquisition cost where we originally started on. So Jamie, what are your thoughts on really working on that to bring that number down?
So that is a challenge, right? I think, finding niche ways to hack the system, it's getting harder to do, but finding, search terms, for instance, that maybe are underutilized, or even building a segment around underutilized search terms is one way to kind of take that on from an SEO perspective. And you're going to have to get creative. There's a reason Facebook stock is valued where it's at. It's, a never-ending treadmill. And yes, it's going to deliver results, but the more it delivers results, the more you get copycats and the higher your acquisition cost goes, right? And it's kind of this vicious cycle. So, I've seen this before too, where you get, some level of engagement, you get your product knocked off, your idea knocked off, like 10 competitors jump in the same space, in the same segment, and all of your bidding goes up to the point where you're not actually breaking even because of the cost of acquisition. So I think, to Kim's point earlier, to Tom's point, John's, it's the content is king. You've got to also, you can't underestimate the value of building a brand that is followable. So the organic has to be built. It can't be a separate track. You've got to be thinking about organic at the same time you're building that PPC program out. And how do you get the level of engagement? At the end of the day, the only thing that's going to keep your CAC down is to have a brand that has a personality, that has a brand voice that's approachable, and that's active in a community perspective. If you look at any great brand that anybody follows on Instagram, they've got a personality, they've got a voice, they interact with their buyers, and that is what really kind of starts to drive that cost of the acquisition down. When you can flywheel that into organic following due to just pure interest around the brand.
Yeah, and that is something I want to chime in really quick before I keep the conversation going, because that's something I wanted to give a big kudos to Tom and Convisio about what you guys are doing, because you are so focused on providing the value to the community instead of just pitching your web hosting services. You're always, whenever we speak, you're always focused on educating and learning for yourself rather than just selling what you have to offer. And I think that is a treat that many brands could use, because it's something that, as you said, Jamie, it makes you relatable as a person and not just as a company. And it also comes back to the hustle a little bit, because at least from my experience, it's tied to your person, Tom. And that is something that I'm not sure how sustainable that is over the long time, but I'm pretty sure that you are aware of that. So thank you for the work that you are doing. And also thank you for the amazing wheel that you have in the virtual booth. I've just put the link onto the screen, because you're really making nobody a loser. You have a prize for everybody who's spinning the wheel. And many people from this panel are involved in that. So just a big thank you for supporting this event like this.
My pleasure. It's great. And that's sort of like the DNA of my personality. So if all I had to do was wake up and sell things, I wouldn't be super fulfilled in life. So thank you. I appreciate the shout out. And yes, go check out the wheel, because we've got Kim's product, John's product, and Damie's product all up for giveaway on the wheel. So it's quite a rich prize wheel.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Jan,
the
can I
richest
just,
one.
I'm sorry, I was going to give a shout out to Tom too, because we had to move the Content Creators Planner off of another hosting service. It was too slow, and they did the migration, they optimized us, and we're there. And we're doing with cart flows and Woo, and so we've had other issues. But so I just wanted to give them a shout out too, because they were fantastic in helping us get the site moved and optimized. And I hate them.
Thank you, Kim.
And that is a perfect segue, Kim. We didn't rehearse that, but it's the perfect segue for the next question that I have, which comes to technical challenges when you scale your store. Because assuming that what we've talked so far works, and we drive down the cost of acquisition, and we know how to generate more leads and customers, at some point the store will inevitably face technical challenges. So I would love, maybe John, if you could take this on. What are some of the technical challenges that you have to be aware of when scaling an e-com business?
Well, it actually can be quite a gamut. Sometimes I've seen fellow ecom startups fail with everything from things that aren't super technical, like fulfillment. Like that seems to be a big one, right? People sometimes have to end up outsourcing fulfillment, or sometimes it is very technical. Sometimes it's as granular as buttons not working on the theme, or scripts that they decided to, or apps that they may have decided to install, and they're not going to be able to handle high loads. When we were talking about flash sales, that's something that I really am sensitive to, because as e-com businesses get bigger and bigger, we were talking about starting small, but once you've got that growth and you've got some growth hacks in place and you're really starting to feel that traffic, you'll find the weak points, because things are going to fail. You might have to start getting your images on CDNs, depending on what platform you're on. That might be done for you, but if you're on WordPress or something like that, or other open source platforms, something you're hosting, that's a major concern. You need to know what your weak points are. You need to know what's going to fail, and you don't want to have something that maybe if it was cached, it wouldn't have made the request a million times. But if it isn't, then you're taking down the mothership. Everything's going to go down. So it's hard to answer that question, because there's so many different areas that could be. But I think I got the conversation started, so I can jump in and get a little more granular if somebody wants to bog down on something.
So your technology infrastructure is going to change. It needs to be evaluated. It's got to be measured. And there are so many millions of options. At the end of the day, is how good is your technology partner at scaling with you on the business side of the equation? So if you have a host, how ready are they to jump in, to help you out, to understand what your needs are? What other services are you connect to? Is each one of them sort of aligned with you and understands where something might be going? Can you let them know ahead of time that, if we're going to talk about flash sales, if that's coming up, what can they do to make sure that you're, ready to go as well? So if you, button down everything as much as you know and can on the performance side, sort of on a regular day-to-day basis, how do your partners react on a consultative and business side to make sure that you're also successful? And are they sort of also invested in your success outside of, look, we had the servers on, the rest is your problem?
Man, that's a great point, Robert. I totally want to echo that as well, because back to the apps and plugins and things like that, or scripts that you might add to your site, that's something that everybody should not be afraid to ask those providers. They're providing you a service, so don't be afraid to leverage that relationship. You'll know right away if they say, "Oh, yeah, that's not our problem," then they might not be the best partner. You want somebody who's going to back you up.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think historically, sort of, it's been hard in the WordPress space, right? Because you look at like what Shopify is doing, and what Shopify, I keep forgetting, is it Plus or Pro? What's
Plus?
Plus. Shopify Plus is doing, which is their like sort of like enterprise tier of customers, and they had a really big niche in the marketplace, right? Where you get really a lot of customization with a product like WooCommerce. But if you don't have your infrastructure and your host right and your scaling right and all of that stuff, and so Shopify made it sort of turnkey, right? Where it's like, hey, we take care of the scaling. You don't have to worry about it. But there's trade-offs in that. And I think that, particularly you see hosts struggling with one platform, looking to go, well, it's my platform, right? And the reality is it's not you can scale WooCommerce, till the cows come home. And, it's going to be that, are you using proper like edge caching, right? Have you looked at your database queries? Do you know, what are the things that are taking up a lot of load time on your pages? So your pages load, do you have the right database infrastructure and optimization at that level? And so there's a lot of stuff you can do. And I think that the one way that Shopify is sort of kind of outmaneuvered WordPress a little on this, and I'm a WordPress guy, so it hurts my heart to say that, but that is a lot for someone running a WooCommerce store to figure out. That is not usually their area of expertise, right? And so Shopify was like, yeah, come over, we'll take care of all that.
Yeah, I have a perfect story about this, actually. I was working with a brand that's also represented on the summit by Michael Siegel, who's speaking on the last day. They were a 6-figure a month WooCommerce store with some really tricky customization going on. And the team they worked with before my team came on board and took over maintenance, they didn't do the best job of building that infrastructure and building that customization and writing that code in a performant way, at least. So we had to jump in. We had to fix some bugs and take over. And what they did is they sold these decoration subscription boxes where every quarter you would get a box with decoration that matches the time of the year. And those boxes were due to renew on the same day every quarter. So it's always like April 20th and then September 20th and November 20th and stuff like that. And that custom code, which I assume was very easy to build in Shopify, was a real bottleneck on WooCommerce. So that's just one thing from my experience in that everlasting discussion of WooCommerce versus Shopify and how to scale WooCommerce to really reasonable amounts of revenue, that you need to have very good tech partners and developers to do that.
And John, Jamie, is there scaling problems with Shopify? Do people run into that with like third-party plugins and stuff that really slow it down?
No, not really. Everything scales seamlessly there. So, I mean, even, we've all seen the Black Friday, Cyber Monday numbers, and it scales pretty infinitely at that point. I think ways that you can would be really more on like front-end performance. There are ways to do bad front-end development coding where you have infinite for loops happening in the front-end code, which is not great. You can have bad plugins that improperly load JavaScript, or they're not optimized. So I think more on the performance side there would be really the front end. There is some activity now on the PWA front that is highly optimizing that through React and some other bells and whistles to kind of speed up the front end as well. I think if you look at this really, either platform, there's no right answer here, right? And that's the reason we have so many great platforms out in the wilderness. We've got Woo, we've got Magento on the open source, we've got Joomla on the open source side, we've got Drupal on the open source side. And then we've got our SaaS products like, BigCommerce and Shopify, for instance. But I think they're there for different needs, different life cycle stages, and different levels of complexity too. Like, if you want a heavy B2B site, you're probably going to go with a Magento or a Salesforce Commerce Cloud. If you've got, an early stage to mid stage, and you want to have high level of control over what you're doing, what the infrastructure looks like, you're probably going to go with the Woo. If you are simple and need turnkey service, you're probably going to start off with the Shopify or BigCommerce. So I don't see it as one platform versus another. I see it as very prescriptive. And what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what tool do we pull out of the toolbox to help that merchant?
And I just got to give a shout out to Equid, who just raised $42 million
Holy cow.
in VNs.
Wow.
So like, I was like, I know those guys, great crew of guys, and total congratulations to that. That's awesome. But that's just another signal about how the marketplace is going to heat up with yet more people getting seriously into e-commerce.
Yeah, agreed.
And just on a side note, I saw a question from Luciana. She was asking how to watch the replay or how to watch it from the very beginning. If you're jumping in straight into the conversation right now, we'll leave the replay on the website. We'll leave it in the Facebook group, on the Facebook pages, and on YouTube, so that you have plenty of ways to catch the replay. Interesting. So how do we decide on what platform to use then for our needs?
Yeah, that is a tough one.
This should be like a battle royale. Like we should all
Right.
start screaming at each other.
We have 10 minutes spare, so let's do this.
Well, I think Jamie hit it on the head. Maybe there's not a right platform, but I think there is definitely a realistic situation where you need to think about what are you trying to build? If you're trying to build something that's going to stand up to a high amount of scrutiny, you're going to have regular releases, product releases, flash sales. So you don't have to be a big store. You don't have to be a mega enterprise customer to need good infrastructure. So if you're choosing infrastructure that's already set up for you, in other words, plug and play, then I think Shopify is great. If you need more design flexibility, like Jamie said, maybe you already have, or you are a developer, or you have already people on your staff that are developers, and you really want to plug into what you have. You already have a WordPress site. It's such a popular CMS. So if you already have a WordPress site and you just want to extend that, I think that makes a lot of design flexibility sense. I think you also can look at cost, cost over convenience. Sometimes it seems really cheap to get a $29 a month plan to go with a hosted SaaS commerce. But then, you end up adding on sometimes some of those platforms, a lot of the functionality that you want. Anything more than basic, simple setup, you're adding apps or plugins, depending on what the platform is. And those, sometimes on platforms, it's a one-time fee. Sometimes it's a recurring subscription. And those sound really low because maybe it's a really low amount. But then over time, you've got 10, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 plugins or apps. It does add up. So I think you have to always consider that as well. If you're starting up, what kind of budget are you looking for versus the limitations of the platform that you're on. And then the third thing I would say is look at the actual technical limitations. There's I don't know if it's still true or not, but there used to be an old argument about limitations of product variations on Shopify. Jamie, you can probably squash that one for me if it's not true anymore, but I know there used to be a hard cap on variants. You could have 100 product variants and something like 3 product options or something like that. Whereas WooCommerce, it was infinite, and then you had plugins, or if you're a developer yourself, you could turn that into any magic combination you wanted to. It was limitless, basically.
Yeah, as far as I know, that limitation is still in place. 3 options, 100 variants. So again, there we've got something that maybe, because of the way that I sell my product or configure my product, that's not going to work for me. I've heard, like John said, I've already got CMS running. I already have, free modules that I can plug in and that will take care or replace, multiple applications. And I sell in a way that I need, 300 variants and 5 options. So again, it's a prescriptive nature of the business that we're in, right? That's the reason, we've all got good competition in the marketplace, not only with our own products and services, but the platforms do as well, because there is no one right answer, holy grail. And
that's not going to stop us from arguing about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That wouldn't be nearly as fun.
I have a question for Kim about this, right? So we talked earlier about, by the way, I got a quick tip. You don't mind if I co-host this with, do you, Jan? I'm kind of feel like I'm...
No worries. And
okay.
I just brought on Bernhard real quick because he jumped in at the best time ever for this session to just watch the Battle Royale. So
this is going to be on the sizzle reel. Okay, so we talked earlier about how important organic traffic was, and my little tip around that is look at the pages. Jamie sort of alluded to this. Look at the pages that are underperforming in terms of conversion or rankings, and like SEO optimize those products. But for Kim, I mean, content marketing is a big strategy. I think WordPress wins hands down in content marketing. Like, I am not going to want to do SEO on Shopify, right? And so how does a store figure out, how much of that is important? And do I make my main domain my Shopify store, or do I make my main site my info site and my blog in WordPress and hang a store off of it? Like, what do you think about all that?
That's what I would do. And it's funny because I have a friend that is doing some Canva templates, and she does WordPress sites and could very easily do WooCommerce, but she's like, I don't want to ding around with it. So she's got the branded site on WordPress, and then her shop is on Shopify. And now if I were to do something else that my name wasn't attached to it, it was literally just an e-commerce brand that I could play with, I may do the same thing. I mean, Jody is dialed in with WooCommerce, and so it just made sense. She's got another e-commerce store. But I honestly think, because I don't think even if it's a brand without my name, I wouldn't stop creating content because I believe in the value of it. So I think that's what I would do. I would do a WordPress branded site, and then the shop checkout is through Shopify. I think that's the easiest thing, personally.
Yeah. And so in that way, you can sort of have your cake and eat it too, in some respects.
Yeah, and I got to throw another option there before Jamie does, because I know he's huge on this. Is if you haven't thought about it yet, look into headless commerce. Headless e-commerce is the concept of where you basically already have your site somewhere else and you need e-commerce functionality. So you can start to leverage, all the platforms are getting into the game now. It used to be kind of cutting edge a year or so ago, but now everybody's doing it. And basically you can leverage APIs to make API calls from your site. Now it does take a little bit that's the trade-off. It does take somebody who can do that. So you might have to hire a developer if you don't have one on staff, or read some tutorials, but it's not too hard. So basically what you can do is you basically take like a WordPress site, and if you didn't want to use WooCommerce, you wanted to use Shopify, you don't necessarily have to get a Shopify site and then skin everything from scratch and try and make it all fit it. You can actually use APIs to proxy over the orders to the back end of Shopify. So it's almost like you're getting, and I'm using Shopify as an example. It could be any headless commerce provider. But
I think BigCommerce does that, right? Isn't BigCommerce like they've got a headless WordPress integration or something, don't they?
Yeah.
Well, that's freaking awesome. You guys totally introduced me to something I wasn't familiar with. So thanks.
There you go.
That does not happen all the time, folks. I got news for you.
Am I going to be the only one who goes all in on open source, and that you don't want to, cut off, your knees, starting out with being in a proprietary system and getting, bogged down in tools that you can't migrate out of and getting stuck and then having to rebuild from scratch multiple times over and over again? No one wants to take that challenge?
You Go just ahead. Did, man.
Take it away. It's yours.
I mean, there's two things about it, like doing a fully open source solution. There's the ownership of what you're putting into your business. So if Shopify owns that business to X degree, that's no longer your property. And then the flexibility, of course, from shifting and changing and moving around. I don't think Kim would have been as successful on a SaaS system going from one infrastructure provider to another without that kind of WordPress, WooCommerce, open source flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and actually, Bernhard wants some punches thrown.
I saw that. That's funny.
So I will say, and you brought up a great point, Robert, which is, we've all seen. Well, I've heard of people who've had their entire business based around Facebook, and what happens? Facebook turns on them and is like, you violated something, or did something, and we're suspending you. And there is a realm of people who are selling services that might be on the edge of violating some terms of service. I immediately think of like the medical marijuana space, right, where it's like questionable as to like what laws and whatnot are allowed. Another one might be firearms, all sorts of things around those spaces. And so that is true with WordPress. You kind of own it. And if your site gets shut off and you've got a backup of it, you can go host it anywhere. Right. And so sure. with if you get shut down, and I don't know if that's ever happened, but like if you get shut down on Shopify and you've got a substantial like store already built up, like you're likely going to be out of business for an extended period of time.
Well, can I piggyback on that too? The other thing, both of our agencies, the first agency had their own proprietary software that they did tracking with. And initially it didn't integrate with Woo. So they put us on ClickFunnels for a month. And then then they had to build it into Woo. And then the second agency wanted to split test with Unbounce. And we're like, no, we're paying to send traffic. You send it to our site. Like, it just makes more sense. We did it once and we love this agency, but if you're paying for traffic, I want it to go to our site too. So that helps when you've got the SEO and the CMS going at the same time.
Good point.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also, in your case, Kim, you are familiar with WordPress. Like, you know it inside out, and you know exactly what you can do and what type of strategies you can run to drive the traffic on the one hand, but then also convert the traffic and build that relationship while people are on your site. So I think that's always something to keep in mind, is how steep is the learning curve for the platform that you are evaluating.
Yeah, and I think too, lastly, that it really depends on what you're doing with the business and the brand, right? I mean, I have a friend who has done millions and $30 million on ClickFunnels. He doesn't care. He knows e-commerce. He knows how to do paid traffic. He's got the list. He does all of that. So it depends on what the business is. Like, again, our names are attached to this. This is a brand. Our hearts are a part of this, right? So I think that you also have to get really clear on what you're doing with the business, and what the end goal is with it. So, ease of use is going to cut down the learning curve for sure.
Yeah, I think that goes to the point you made earlier, Kim, which is you're either going to pay in time or money, right? And so, choose your acquisition strategy allotted to which you have more of, and it's probably very similar on the platform side. Choose your platform based on what you're going to have more time or money, because you're going to pay one way or the other.
Yeah, and I saw a good question that I would like to discuss here. Maybe Robert is the best person to answer this. Are there any open source payment providers?
Ooh, I think the closest we're getting to that is what WooCommerce just added in. I think it was just last week in conjunction with, I can't remember who the end payment provider is now off the top of my head. I do want to say Stripe, but I'm not quite sure. Some of that stuff is going to be difficult just because of the regulatory environments around that, and it would be awesome to have that. But an open source project won't have the accountability for a bank or for the SEC, so on and so forth, to make sure that that transaction can be completely processed correctly. So, I mean, that's the trick. Can it
honestly, the biggest...
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say Bitcoin is the biggest.
Yeah.
That's all I can think of.
Closest, yeah.
I was going to say that too, but then you also got to think about your own liability. Do you really want that kind of liability on your own shop if you're in charge of that, technically the compliance, the PCI compliance, and what have you, all the different regulations?
And even with Bitcoin, if from the financial side, you can't count on that coin being the same today as it was yesterday. So it's hard to project out what you're actually getting for your service or product.
It's still interesting to see these stories where people paid for a pizza with like 3 Bitcoins back in the day.
Yeah. And those would be worth $91 million today.
Yeah. I'm sure I've got a Bitcoin or two laying around somewhere in some drives.
Just a matter of finding them, yeah.
I've got some friends who have a different currency like that, and they don't even have an open exchange for it. So try getting rid of that.
That is so funny. I mean,
it's a crazy world.
How did we get here? We get here with open source and
open source payment providers.
Interesting. So, John, you've teased us quite a bit with the flash sale conversations going on. I would love to dive into that. So,
sure.
I think the first time we talked about this was in the context of bots, but I let you take it. on
Sure.
any
Well,
angle
we
that
can
you'd
talk
like.
about that. I think other time I mentioned it was about infrastructure being make sure you can handle the load that's coming your way. Don't spend a bunch of money marketing it and then not having a weak link, or having a weak link that might not be able to take it, whether it be an app or something that you've got on your store. But certainly with respect to bots, I think it would be a lost opportunity on my part, right? If I didn't talk about that. So I'd be happy to oblige. So there is such a thing as they used to call them. You know. I guess sneaker bots is the best term that when I first found out about them, and they've been they're basically bots. There's a whole marketplace now. If maybe this is something else, Kim, Tom, I don't know, somebody might not know about, so I'll try and throw another one in there, another learning experience. But there actually is a whole another world full of these bots that are just like an app that you would buy, right? Just like a something you would run on your desktop, and they allow you to put in keywords and put in your predetermined payment information and your shipping profiles and all of this, and you basically just say what you want to get. And I mean, I'm making it a little bit simpler than it really is, but you can spin up proxies so that you can come from all these different network angles, not to get too techie with it, but it basically looks like you're coming from all over the place, not just one. So it makes it very hard for the infrastructure providers to actually stop these things from getting through. And so there's all kinds of advanced techniques like queuing systems and IP ban lists and things that can easily get circumvented by these really sophisticated bots that were originally created to get the latest sneakers, right? So a pair of Jordans or Yeezys or something go on sale at a certain site, and you just put your stuff in there, and you want to get ahead of the line. You can get yourself 5 or 50 pairs and then put them up for resale the next day for a hijacked price, right? 3 times whatever the current going rate was, because they were a limited release. And so you have that kind of stuff that eventually some merchants have to deal with. And so that's what I was alluding to, is that we actually do have a product. Our Plus product is actually aimed at that. So, and the funny thing is it's not nearly as narrow of a niche anymore. It used to be sneakers. Now it's everything from children's apparel to street apparel to artwork to you would not believe it. And there's more and more bot providers every week, it seems like. And so the game just keeps going and going and going. So we do actually have a product. If you go to our site, you can read more about it. But that does combat that. And so that's what I was alluding to. It wreaks havoc with your customer, your customer satisfaction. Some people, actually don't mind the bots because, the argument is, well, if I sell 5,000 pairs of sneakers in 5 minutes, what's the problem in that? But you get a lot of angry people when they can't get their pop memorabilia the next day because they had 2 seconds to get it and they couldn't beat the bots.
It feels like the Rammstein tickets I tried to get last year for their tour. They were sold out in like 15 minutes or something on a global scale. It was insane.
There you go.
That's right. And then they sell them on the aftermarket like for 300%.
Yeah.
That's it.
You'd be cheap if you got them for 300%. It would be really cheap. Yeah.
Yeah, you did blow my mind, John. I think of chatbots. That's what I think about. I was like,
well, then you're fortunate. You haven't had to deal with it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Is it that I think some shops, they make it on purpose that you cannot order the products like normally 24/7. I think the Fifth Watches do that, where they just open the shop for every 5th day of the month, and then they build up the anticipation due to that. If those were hit by a bot or an army of bots just waiting for the 5th of the month to come, I think they would have a huge problem.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly the scenario that we had to build this product for. And that's, this is a good one to go back to, the whole thing about trying to increase your conversions and things like that too, marketing to your existing customer base is one thing I was going to say when we were talking about acquisition, reducing the cost there as well, is I can really attest to this, is we learned by listening to our customers. That was never even on our radar when we first got started. We were just trying to make a capture replacement. We didn't want to have to click the silly little, is this a traffic signal? Is this a car? And so we graduated into form spam and then fake account creation. And then finally we had some larger merchants that were having these problems with bot-based checkouts. And so But I would come back around to that to say that that's probably the thing that helped us the most, was actually letting our product roadmap and our view of how customers saw our products be dictated to us rather than the other way around.
That's such an important lesson. Thanks for sharing that. I think that I've had a conversation yesterday this morning in the launch with Todd Jones, who's going on calls for each new customer that he's getting, or on the scale he's at that's still feasible. And he just said that it's such a good learning experience of how to phrase the wording on this product detail pages, for example, or how to even position himself in the market, because it's just so valuable what he's learning from the customers that are buying his quite new product, so that he can rephrase what they are saying and use it in his own marketing terms.
I do that a lot with our customers too. I was going to say really quick, because what's happened is we have people buying that we didn't think was our target audience necessarily. And so like I popped on a Zoom call with a realtor, and then someone else was saying, how do I use this for a nonprofit? Or what do I do if one person said, I sell high ticket, how would you use content to sell high ticket services? And so I just keep offering to get on Zoom with these people, and I walk them through it and how I would move through each piece, or where there's a disconnect, or like, why isn't there like this at the beginning of this and stuff? And so, I mean, that's been gold for us. Like, I love talking to people to find out, because now I'm like, wow, we can run verticals, ads to target.
That's huge.
Right?
Back to that hustle.
Totally.
Yeah, interesting. I would love to know what you think, Tom, about getting on the calls with your customers as early as you can.
Oh yeah, I mean, that is one of the things that we did often early and still do, which is listen to customers and ask, how did you find us? What were you looking for? What are the problems you're trying to solve? I mean, quite honestly, we got into the e-commerce space because our main sort of audience is agencies, right? But we got into the e-commerce space because we had people coming to us like Kim and, some other customers who were saying, I'm on this really large server or this large hosting package, and it's failing at processing my checkouts. And so we decided to start running some WooCommerce, and we're like, wow, our platform's really fast at running WooCommerce. And so that was a whole new niche that we started to go into, all because we were listening to customer feedback.
That's really interesting. And I think you're always also having these conversations with potential partners as well. So it's not just listening to the people who are already using your service, but also for people that might be beneficial partners to bring more value to your customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'll hop on sales calls with our sales team. I'll hop on discovery calls. I think it's really important that we, are always engaged with the front line, so that we can flywheel that back either to, in the case of us, our SaaS product. But if you're selling a product that maybe has some specific technical, pieces to it. I mean, I think this is important to flywheel that back into your marketing campaign, or even how you word things to avoid misunderstandings, or to make sure that you're getting the right target audience.
Yeah, being close to your customers is very valuable, especially in the early stages.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would love, before we wrap this up, because we're already 15 minutes over the scheduled time. So thank you for everybody who's watching this. Time is flying in these panels. Before we wrap this up, I would love to share the screen real quick. And I would love to walk you through the booth that Convisio has built for us in this summit. First of all, again, thanks, Tom, for making this happen and for supporting the event. And if you go to the sponsors tab in the header menu and then click on the Convisio logo, you'll be taken right here. And I'll also post a direct link in the comments on Facebook and YouTube and everywhere, literally, so that you can check out the booth. And what is super exciting is this spinning wheel. We talked about this a little bit earlier, and I just wanted to show you how cool this is, because it's not just a phrase to catch your attention, everyone is a winner, but really everybody who's spinning the wheel wins something. And that is something that all of you are contributing to. So thanks again for doing that and for providing that value to the community. And I think it's something that every single person attending this event should do, because it's really valuable stuff that you are giving away here. So we're seeing the Omnisend subscription, we're seeing free WordPress hosting, Kim's Content Creators Planner, which is insanely good. And I'm just hearing some echo. I'm not sure where that echo is coming from. Okay, it's gone now. Perfect. So sorry for that. And then back to the wheel, we see 1 year of WordPress hosting. So I would like to have 1 year of free WordPress hosting. I'm going to spin the wheel right after this call and hoping that I get it. And then, yeah, as I said, it's just really, really valuable stuff. And if you want to learn more about Convisio, you can book a demo. And I would urge Tom to get on the demo, because he's in the Facebook groups, so he can definitely prove that he's hustling as much as he said in this conversation. So get in touch with Tom in the Facebook group. Text Ellen from Convisio is in the group too, so you have multiple people to speak to. And just check out the booth and the other booths from Split Hero and Weglot too, because there's some amazing stuff waiting for you. And yeah, I don't have anything more to say than thank you everybody for making this panel happen. It was an honor to be with you on this session. And if you have any remarks and anything that I missed, it's now your chance to point this out to me. Otherwise, we just say I have to confess, the year is gone. Congrats, Bernhard, but I'll still play the wheel. Maybe I get another one. We'll see. I don't know how many Convisio is giving away, so it's definitely worth playing again.
We can make an exception for you, Jan. He just won that right out from under you, man. That's like that's the downside of promoting this.
Damn. But anyways, I'm glad that people are taking this up. So Connor, thanks for being with us, and thanks for the kind feedback for this panel. And again, we'll just keep this panel available, keep the replay available throughout the entire summit, so that you can rewatch it at your own convenience. And thanks everybody for watching this. We'll call it a day, and I'll end the panel in a few seconds. Have a great evening, great day,
Thanks,
wherever you are.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.